Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get the show started in a minute. Just want to let everybody know that the live stream is getting ready to go right now, and we'll get started in a minute. What's up, Luciano? Going to get started in a minute. Just want everybody to know that the show is going on. Okay. What's going on, Steve Orwala Mac? And what's up, Supremo? Glad that you're all here. I'm going to get started right now. And tonight's topic is going to be about the fall of Milestone Media 2.0 and why Black creators of comic books, science fiction, manga, we all have to work together. What's going on, Sketch Stevens? Glad to see you here. And Milestone Comics was a Black owned publishing company that was founded by four Black comic creators: Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and Derek Dingle. And these four men, in I think 1993, launched the Milestone Media comic book line, which featured Black superheroes and a universe that was revolving around characters of color in the city of Dakota. And the four titles of the initial launch were Hardware, which was about Kurt Metcalf, an angry Black man who felt that he wasn't getting what he was due from Alva Industries and wanted to strike out against Edwin Alva for exploiting him. And then there was Blood Syndicate, which was about this gang on Paris Island. Then there was Icon, the series about the brother from another planet. And then there was Static, which was about a teenager who got electrical powers and was a lot like the old school Spider-Man comic book. And these four comics had a major impact on the comic book industry because it was the first time we actually got to see Black superheroes created by Black creators, which gave us a picture of the Black experience, something we never got in comic books in the history of the industry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. Glad to see you here at the stream. And I was talking about Milestone Media 2.0's fall and the why Black comic creators have to work together. That's the topic of tonight's show. And when Milestone came out, a lot of Black comic fans like myself, we really were enthusiastic about Milestone Media because it was the first time again that we saw Black superheroes created by Black creators and giving us a picture of the Black experience. And we never got that because, yes, we got Black characters like Power Man, like Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau, and like your Black Panther and the Falcon. However, all of those characters were created by white comic creators, and they were giving us a picture of the Black experience from a white perspective. So all those characters, yes, they were Black characters, but they did not have the character inside of them that made them black. And that was something that we got that was unique and distinct from Milestone Media. For example, with Hardware, we got a picture of many of the hardworking brothers out there who go out here and get the degrees and work on merit and want to get equal compensation from the companies they work at, but are often denied due to racism. And that was something we got from Hardware that I could relate to as a guy in college and a guy who has been on many jobs out here. I could relate to Hardware and what he went through as related to not getting what you're due and wanting to strike out to get some sort of justice because you've gone out here and you've put in the work based on the merit and you feel like you're not getting the same fair, equal compensation that other people are getting from these companies. And that's something a lot of black men, we know from personal experience. And with Static, I saw a lot of the experiences I had growing up in high school where you're the introverted, awkward teenager and you're struggling and you're in this world where you have to not only deal with racism and bullying from kids in school, but you also have to deal with intra-racism from other black people. And this is something that a lot of kids that related to because this is something we grew up with and dealt with. And Icon, this was a book that had a major impact on me as a creator, but it showed us that the brother from another planet, and it showed us the experience of what a Superman would deal with if he was black and he had to experience racism and Jim Crow. And Icon was a book that had a major impact on me because it inspired me in the development of the ISIS character in 1999 as I was developing the character and working on her story as her experiences with racism and how white supremacy literally turned her into a way where she wound up killing all of those Klansmen. I got all that inspiration primarily from the Icon comic book because as I looked at it, I said, this character, yes, he dealt with racism, but it really did not really impact how deep white supremacy did. So when I was writing ISIS, I wanted to show the psychological impact of white supremacy on the mind of someone who did come from another realm and how it could lead to them taking actions that could wind up getting them jammed up really bad. And that was something I wanted to do with ISIS that I didn't really see delved into Icon, but I wanted to dig a little deeper into it. And it's a book that Icon is very inspiring, and it's a very thought-provoking comic because it really takes the whole Superman mythos and turns it on its ear. And then we get the relationship between Augustus Freeman and Rocket that really makes you think. And those are the 4 books that laid out the foundation for Milestone. And a lot of people, they were thinking, oh, these Milestone books, like guys like Diversity and Comics are saying, oh, these books were too black. But no, these were books that were giving us a fair and balanced perspective of the black experience, something we never really got in comics. And they gave us perspective in comics that really added to the diversity of thought. So that was something that I really enjoyed when I would go out and buy Milestone comics. I bought them from a black vendor on Fordham Road when I was going to college, and I would always look forward to picking those books up. I remember when I first started buying them, I bought the #1 issues. I had a family member, and he thought that they were exploitive, but I said, no, this is not exploitive. This is not blaxploitation. This is a balanced picture of blackness, and this was a story. These were stories that were coming from the real, and he didn't think they were much of anything, but I still kept collecting them. I remember one day I was getting ready to graduate from college, and I saw the back issues, and I started picking up back issues that I didn't get, and thank God I was glad to get a lot of those back issues because they're out there, but I'm just glad to have had them and read them at the time, and I still have those Milestone books in my closet. I read them from time to time. And they had a major impact on a lot of black creators out here like myself, and they had a major impact on the overall picture of comic books. And it was really sad to see Milestone go out the way it did, because I believe that Milestone could still have a major impact, and it could have really changed the marketplace for comic books. And because those characters, they're really strong and they're really well developed. And there was so much stuff that I liked about those books that, again, they had such an impact on me and the books that I wrote over the years, that I would have loved to have been a part of Milestone. And I did apply for a job writing for them back in the 1994-95, but I didn't know that they were in trouble at the time. Supremo, what was way before that was, I remember Gabriel Jones and Jim Wilson and Robbie Robertson. And yeah, they were positive portrayals of Black characters. But again, they came from white creators, but we never really got that authentic Black experience until we got Milestone Media. They were steps in the right direction, but we never really got that true great Black experience like we did with Milestone. Milestone really gave us that, not only the characters from the Black experience, but it also showed that diversity of thought, because we had Icon, who was a Black conservative. We had Hardware, who was a straight down the middle kind of guy. And then we had Static, who was a teenager. Thank you, Black Ronin, for the donation. And we had the Blood Syndicate, who were showing us life on the streets. So we didn't just get one Black experience from those comics. We got several Black experiences, and it showed that the Black community had not only diversity as related to just being Black, but it showed a diversity of thought. And when I look at Milestone, I see where they made a couple of mistakes as they were trying to expand. And a couple of the books they did, yes, they were nice concepts, but they really didn't reach a target audience. I remember Zombie was a very good book, but it just really, what the demographic wasn't really there. And I remember Shadow Cabinet, it was like too similar to Blood Syndicate. I think they should have done something to make it a little bit more distinct as a team. And I really loved Cobalt as a concept, because it was a story that was really there. John Rossum had the best premise with that book, but the problem was that they made it about, as I saw it, two white characters, and then that really probably turned away a lot of readers. But the concept was rock solid. I mean, I love the satire, it's almost satirical take on superheroes and what it was to mean to start to be a superhero. And all of those books were rock solid, but they just came out of an expansion that I think went the wrong way. I think one of the things they should have done was a Rocket Limited series, and I think they should have introduced a heroine. I believe that would have been a right direction for that book. And I believe that would have been the best direction for Milestone. But then Milestone, as I was reading books from 95 on, I could see a bit of a negativity in the office, because when you read the letters page, there was a lot of frustration about sales, and the industry itself wasn't in a really good place at the time. So I could see the frustration in the letters page and from the editor's page, but because they didn't really know how to set a course for themselves. And sadly, in 2 years, we saw the end of the first Milestone era in about 1997. And the characters still managed to go on in terms of having a following, and they still have a following to this day. Supremo, I never did catch Icon on Young Justice because I didn't have cable at the time, but I will take a look at it if I can see it on YouTube. But I did watch Static Shock, and that was a great show that really introduced the Milestone character of Static to a larger universe. And as they incorporated him into the DC universe, this was what really led to the character becoming even bigger, because Static Shock, they thought the show wasn't going to do anything. I remember them with WB, they were like, oh, this show isn't going to do anything. They put it on a schedule and thought it was going to be dead in a year, but it just got more and more popular with each year. And it was actually the top rated cartoon at one time. But sadly, there was no real plan for merchandising. And I had actually sent an email to Dwayne McDuffie back in the day asking what was up with that, because I said to myself, Jackie Chan Adventures, a show that it was even smaller than Static Shock, had a merchandise line from Playmates, but Static didn't have a merchandise line. And I said something suspect with that, because as a guy who was a toy collector, and I've gone to these toy shows and toy fairs, and my brother and I, we would talk to different people, like from representatives from Kenner and Hasbro, and I always thought that that was suspect, because when it came down to the show, it was extremely popular, but you don't get a toy line, but Jackie Chan does, and Jackie Chan had half the following. His cartoon was nowhere near as big as Static Shock, but he doesn't get a toy line. And Dwayne didn't think anything of it. He thought it was just business, but I knew that something was wrong with that, because as a guy who has gone to these toy fairs and spoken to these representatives, I knew something was wrong with it. I was saying to myself, this should have had a toy line, and that should have been lined up even before you did the animation deal, because these animated shows, they make millions of dollars in revenue, and usually companies are chomping at the bit, because these lines are money in the bank. And with Static Shock's popularity, you could have easily gotten at least about 2 or 3 good 5-inch waves, or at the time, which was starting out, 6-inch scale waves. And it was just really odd to me, because if you're incorporating this character in the DC universe, I'm sitting there wondering, why wasn't there a toy line or even something in-house with DC Direct? Because this show was money in the bank at the time. And just like Daryl Phil says, he believes that Static could have gone 2 more seasons. I believe it could have gone at least 2 more myself, because they were just getting ready to develop the characters, because Virgil's dad finally figured out that he was Static, and that could have led to some very interesting storylines. But then they decided to just do a finale where everybody loses their powers except Static and Richie, and they just decide to just wrap it up with them going on to continue to fight whatever Bang Babies are out there. But this show, I found it baffling. The only toy we ever got was a Subway toy from the Happy Meal or something like that, but we never really got a full action figure line. And this is with DC Direct going on, and DC Direct was making merchandise, and they were making merchandise of other stuff like Teen Titans and all these other shows and the Batman, but no one really wanted to make a Static action figure, and people were sitting there eager to buy one. I'm still eager to buy one, and I have one. Let me see where it is. Okay, let's see where it is. Oh, here it is. I bought this one a while back, and they took some of the accessories out of the package. He was supposed to have his raincoat, but they didn't even put his package yellow raincoat in. I'm still looking for something to go with it. And as you can see, it's horrifically undersized when you compare it to a Marvel Legend. And DC, this was just embarrassing that this is the only figure we ever got of Static, when we should have been getting something on the level of Marvel Legends. And that was one thing that was really sad, that this is the only piece of Milestone merchandise we ever got from DC Icons, and we should have gotten a lot more. Now, the Milestone license after Static ended, yes, we saw the characters appearing in the DC universe, but we never really saw DC do much with them, even though on Young Justice, Icon was showing signs of popularity and Static was still having a following. These characters should have been set up for a comeback in terms of the comic book division, and they should have been set up for some type of comeback with merchandising. But we didn't see any action with these characters, and they were left in limbo as DC restructured into the New 52. Yes, we did get a Static Shock series, but it didn't last long because it was just poorly done, and they really didn't honor what the late Dwayne McDuffie was putting together, and it was just a really poor series. It was just horrifically bad, and it's something that should be avoided. But after about a decade or so, in 2015, we get this announcement from Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, Derek Dingle, and Reginald Hudlin that they're getting ready to launch a Milestone 2.0. And they said that they were going to launch this Milestone 2.0, I believe, at the San Diego Comic-Con. And it came out with this big announcement with all this fanfare. We thought that we were going to see the return of the Milestone heroes, and that everything was gearing up for a 2018 launch. But sadly, what has happened is what happens with a lot of things as related to Black people is that Black people, sadly, don't work together. And what happened in this situation was that Dwayne McDuffie's widow filed a lawsuit against the defendants Cowan, Hudlin, and Dingle, Charlotte McDuffie, regarding the rights of Dwayne McDuffie's estate. And this, and DC Comics' passive aggressiveness, as I see, is the reason why we aren't going to get a Milestone relaunch and why these characters remain in limbo right now. Both of these sides are feuding, and as I see it, the feud is absolutely unnecessary. As a publisher myself who understands copyright law, licensing, and understands the business of publishing, I understand that this was a matter that could have easily been resolved between Charlotte McDuffie and the individuals, Hudlin, Cowan, and Dingle. This could have easily been resolved, and DC Comics could have made a serious effort to resolve that issue between the McDuffie estate, Cowan, Hudlin, and Dingle, by forwarding them the money to either buy off Charlotte McDuffie's by buying the late Dwayne McDuffie's rights, or coming to terms with a deal with Charlotte McDuffie where she could receive fair compensation for her husband's creations. And I believe that the most ethical thing to do in the situation as a publisher, something that I believe would have honored the late, great Dwayne McDuffie's legacy, was to have made a deal with Charlotte McDuffie to ensure that she would have received some sort of fair compensation for her late husband's work, and ensured that his children would have received fair compensation for his work. Because the late Dwayne McDuffie made major contributions towards building the foundation of the Milestone universe. He wrote many of the stories that laid out the foundation for the characters of the Milestone universe, and he helped create many of the characters in the Milestone universe. And this is something that I believe Charlotte McDuffie and Dwayne McDuffie's children, if he has some, they deserve to be compensated for that, because this man worked hard in this comic book business, and I believe he deserves, and his estate deserves, to be fairly compensated. I believe that is the ethical thing for all of the parties, DC Comics and Dennis Cowan, Dingle, and Hudlin, to do, was to have included Charlotte McDuffie in the compensation. I don't believe that they should have bought out her shares. I believe they needed to give her fair and equal compensation, because Dwayne's work was that significant to that business, and it led to the creation of wealth building assets. And because these characters, this intellectual property, they are wealth building assets, she should be able to share some of that wealth with Dwayne's children, if he has children. That's what I believe should have been done. Unfortunately, because Black people, sadly, are Black people, what happened in this situation was they started fighting against each other, not understanding that there was a bigger picture. And in the bigger picture, they needed to understand what was at stake, because we have the image of Black people out here at an all-time low in terms of negativity. We have all of these negative images out here, people fighting in fast food restaurants, twerking, and people out here fighting all the time. And we really needed these milestone characters to make a comeback, because they were a positive image of African Americans, and they presented a balanced image of the African American experience. And that's something we haven't gotten in media for years, ever since the days when Denzel Washington and Halle Berry received Oscars for Monsters Ball and Training Day, and brought back old stereotypes like the Black Brute and the Black Jezebel. And we desperately needed Milestone Media to return to present a counter image for many brothers and sisters out here to have, and many Black comic fans. They were eager to see Milestone return. So it would have been a good business decision for everyone to work together. Unfortunately, when it comes down to a lot of Black folks, they get caught up in their feelings, and they get caught up in their greed. And when I listened to some of the guys in the comment sections talking about how everybody was infighting, I was really sad to hear about that, because we really should have put our feelings aside and focused on the common goal. And the common goal was getting these characters back to the marketplace so they could have that impact on young Black minds, just like they had an impact on my young Black mind at about 20 or so, and really shaped how I went out here to create media. And I believe that the Milestone characters in a 2.0 could have had a major impact on the comic book industry, because in the hands of a visionary, they could have changed the way we saw the image of Black people. And I believe that there was an audience out there for it, because we have this growing audience of Black people out here who have been going out to buy Black comic books by independent Black creators, Black science fiction, Black manga, and Milestone could have had a major impact on the overall comic book industry, because with the comic book industry right now at an all-time slump and everything in a state of decline, this could have been one of those brands that could have created a turning point had it managed to go out here and capture the spirit of old school Milestone while bringing the characters back fresh for a new generation of readers. I believe this could have really been a major turning point for the comic book industry, where we have almost over 50 comic shops closing last year, and we have numerous comic shops closing this year. And I believe Milestone could have had a major impact in turning the tide, because when it comes down to turning the tide, we really needed to see Black characters from the Black experience. And the reason why we need to see that is because when it comes down to what many people call SJW Marvel, this would have been the counterpoint to send to those leftists over there pushing this identity politics, to show them that they do not speak for us, and their narrative is not our narrative. We are telling our own stories and telling our stories about our experience. And that would have been something that would have been a major middle finger up at your SJW Marvel and its paternalistic narratives and its stereotype characters, like the characters they have, these Gordon Goodbrother characters, or these Mammy characters, or these soulful saint characters. We would have seen these more richer, multi-dimensional characters that would have had different viewpoints and different ideas, and it would have really resonated to people at places like your Sana Amanat that their paternalistic view of Black people wasn't going to be the only view of Black people, and we weren't going to go out here and just take the stories that they told us or the Black experience they were going to give us as related to the Black experience. We weren't going to take their story. So what we're going to do is create our own story. And that's something that would have had an impact. Unfortunately, these creators and the McDuffie estate, they thought about just getting into this lawsuit. And what they didn't understand is that when it comes down to these lawsuits can take years to resolve. As somebody who understands copyright law, you don't want to get into a lawsuit as related to intellectual property. As somebody who, again, studied copyright law, I know it can take decades to try to resolve these type of issues, and you can wind up losing a whole bunch of revenue as related to intellectual property. I don't know, is there stream buffering or something? As far as my end is coming, everything is fine. I'm getting, but I'm gonna. All right. But when it comes down to intellectual property, you don't want to get into that type of lawsuit because you could be sitting there for 10, 12, 13 years, 14, 15 years, or even 20 years. And while you're sitting there, the revenue you're losing revenue and your property is depreciating in value. And that's what's happened in the case of this lawsuit that Charlotte McDuffie has filed against your Reginald Hudlin, your Dennis Cowan, and your Derek Dingle. What is happening is their intellectual property is decreasing in value. And this is something, if I had to ever meet them in the street, all four of them, I would try to explain this point about the depreciating value of intellectual property, because you are missing out and the window is slowly closing to capitalize on enriching yourself on this intellectual property that you have. And this is something that I believe that all four parties really needed to have been talked to about, because this is an opportunity to make money. Now, when it comes down to DC Comics, I believe DC Comics is really not acting in good faith because, again, I believe Dan Didio at DC Comics could have easily resolved this situation either by negotiating on behalf of the owners of Milestone to Charlotte McDuffie, and he could have had DC's lawyers negotiate in good faith to them, and that could have been something that could have really mitigated a lot of the issues here, and it could have led to a breakthrough because those lawyers could have easily negotiated some sort of deal where Charlotte McDuffie could have continued to get compensation for her husband's intellectual property, and they could have been able to get these comics out to the marketplace. But because these sides did what Black people sadly usually do, they get into a bickering and arguing situation, and that's something, again, you don't want to do when it comes down to intellectual property. When it comes down to intellectual property, again, copyright infringement lawsuits and intellectual property lawsuits, these things can go on for years, and they can eat up a bunch of money that all the parties could have easily made and wound up losing because everybody is caught up in their feelings, or they're just plain greedy about this property instead of working out a plan to go out here and generate that revenue. Now, when it comes down to your Reginald Hudlin and the parties of Milestone, I see it where they have, dollar signs in their eyes, but they really don't understand business very well. Because from what I've read, your Reginald Hudlin, he wanted to go out here and take the Milestone intellectual property and adapt it into television shows and movies. And I believe that they were not ready to go into that. Yes, Static Shock was a popular show at the time, but that show ended in 2004. And in the time since 2004, it's been about 15 years since Static Shock was on the air, and we really didn't see much action with those intellectual properties for over 15 years. And the best way to get people introduced back to those characters was with the comic books. And I believe that's where the original Hudlin had a disconnect. He didn't really understand that these characters they've been on and off in different shows and guest spots and stuff, but they have not been featured major in any sort of media. So you needed some time to introduce those characters back to the audience. And the best way to do that was with a relaunch of Milestone through 2.0. Let that lay the foundation for reintroducing the characters, and also use the sales numbers as a barometer to leverage any sort of deal with Warner Brothers Animation or Warner Brothers Film towards creating either a television animated series featuring the Milestone characters, a revival of the Static Shock show, or possibly a movie. Because if you can show that these books are selling, whether they be new series or reprints of old material, then you can show that there is a consistent customer base out there, and that customer base is available to make money. And we know there's a customer base out there because Static Shock before was popular, and Black Panther had already shown that there is a huge base for Black fantasy because it made over $700 million at the box office. Unfortunately, because your Reginald Hudlin was too greedy, all he was thinking about was creating this TV shows and properties without building that customer base to really cement that demand, because you have to cement the demand before you supply the product. And you do that incrementally over time. You start out with your comic series, and then as the readers start buying the comics, you then go and branch out into maybe an animated streaming series, and then you start working on your screenplay for either a television series or a movie. And you do this so that each product is building momentum, and as you're building momentum, you're then making that customer base grow larger and larger until you're generating enough of an audience to get the anticipation for a larger budgeted product. And that's something that the Milestone owners should have thought about with 2.0, because they were just eager to announce a 2.0. But as I see it, they really did not develop a comprehensive business plan, and nobody was on the same page. You had them talking about 2.0. You had Hudlin talking about going into making adaptations, but you didn't have that comprehensive plan. Now, when I go out here and I'm doing stuff on the SJS Direct imprint, I always think about doing things incrementally. I mean, over the last 10 years, that's how I've built up the SJS Direct imprint. I mean, I started out with one book all about Maryland, and then I did The Temptation of John Haynes, I think in 2011. Then I did all about Nikki. And then after that, I brought ISIS back after 10 years, and I started the ISIS series. And as I saw the audience coming in for different products, I would always test it out with maybe a freebie. I did that with Easting No Good Deed, which led to the Easting series. And people were asking me about John Haynes. They liked The Man Who Rules the World. And that's how I started doing the John Haynes series. But I always did things incrementally, and I was always looking for new customer bases. And that's how I did Spinsterella, because I wanted to reach the Black Goth subculture. And I always looked for different audiences and different marketplaces. And I didn't see any sort of direction as related to that with Milestone. And I didn't see any sort of comprehensive plan as related to laying a course for Milestone as related to a 3 to 5 year period. Now, when I go out here, I think about what I want to do for the year, and I also think about how it fits into my long-term business plan. So I'm always sitting there thinking about which books to do and how they will impact the overall business. And that's what I think Milestone desperately needed. They really needed a guy who is long-term. I mean, they really need somebody with a long-term vision and a long-term plan towards not only creating Black characters, but creating positive Black images. Because when I looked at it, at the way they were doing things, it was like they wanted to make the fast money, but they weren't thinking about building the brand. Now, when I'm out here, I think about building the brand, and I think about building and crafting images that will allow the brand to remain strong. So that's something I'm always thinking of, but it was sad to see that the Milestone owners, they weren't really thinking about that. Now, the Milestone owners, as I see it, they were getting personal, and they were thinking about things that really they shouldn't have been thinking about, having this feud between each other, because as I see it, Black people, we have to work together. If we ever want to accomplish anything, we have to put our issues aside, put our differences aside, and really just make efforts to work together, because you're not going to be able to be the number one person to do things, and you're not going to be a savior. It's like what God told me, that I expected too much of myself, because back in the days, I wanted to try to do everything, and I was trying to hand draw my covers. I was trying to do my own page layouts, and I was making a product, but it wasn't really making that strong first impression. And I had to start pulling back and bringing in other people, because after I was getting attacked by feminists and even some of these hoteps on ISIS's covers, I decided it's time for me to make some sacrifices. And I sacrificed part of my toy collection so I could hire Bill Walker to design the cover for Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and try to take the SJS Direct imprint in a direction where people could take it seriously. And I believe that that was a good direction to go in. And you really want to go out here and make those sacrifices so that you can get your product out there. And you really want to put that positive image out there to show that you're making those efforts to improve. And that's something that I wanted to see with Milestone, that these guys would go out here and make an effort to try to say that they want to bring this brand back, but they really have to put their issues aside and do what's in the best interest of the business. And I look at the conflicting visions, and especially when I look at the Warrington Hudlin, and I see how he was putting the cart before the horse. You really need to get the sales numbers up on the books, and you need to establish an audience for the books first. Then you can start talking about licensing and merchandising. Then you can start talking about that. But until you have the numbers in the comic book business, you're not going to really have any impact overall. And with the way comics are distributed, it's going to be a challenge to get those readers in. Now, when it comes down to comics these days, we have this over shipping issue, and we have a lot of comic shops that are dying. So we really have to really think about how you're going to market outside of comic books. And that's something that if I was running Milestone 2.0, I would not be thinking about just the comic shops. I'll be thinking about trying to get into other marketplaces like comic shops, or even doing a print on demand run. Because what was really successful with the Static Shock DVD run was it was a video ordered on demand. And I believe that's the term that the comic book industry is going to be going in. And that's the direction that I believe Milestone should have been starting to lay a course to, especially as related to reprints, and especially related to back issues and even some trade paperbacks. They should have been thinking about laying out an on-demand platform and making sure that people can get their books either on a digital platform like Kindle Publishers or a platform like Comixology and a platform like your Kindle Publishers print version, because on those platforms you can just order your books on Amazon, have them shipped to you, and you'll get all your comics like that. And I believe that would have been one good direction for Milestone to go through to get their books distributed, because yes, Diamond is the only thing that sells comics in comic shops, but a smart comic publisher has got to start thinking about entering other platforms for distribution and trying to get your books in the hands of readers. And that's something that I believe Milestone should have been focused on, instead of trying to focus on licensing out the intellectual property for films and television. The focus should have been laying out a business plan and a business model towards reaching new readers in new marketplaces. And that's where I see where Milestone made a big mistake with 2.0 in just making this big announcement, but not really having a business plan or a course for where they wanted to go as related to their business. They desperately should have needed to lay out that foundation first. Then we can start talking about TV shows, cartoons, streaming services, action figures. We can talk about all that when we have the sales numbers, because I believe Milestone Books could have done better than many of these so-called SJW Marvel titles, like your Squirrel Girls, your Kamala Khan Ms. Marvels, your Riri Williams. I believe it could have done better than all of them, because there are more people who like Static than Riri Williams. There are more people who like Icon than your Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel. And I believe DC could have gotten a big chunk of the marketplace had they come out with a strong launch. Now, the other problem that I saw with Milestone 2.0 as related to its announcement was no real concrete as related to creative teams. And if you're going to announce the relaunch of the characters, you need to really start thinking about who is going to be doing these books, because I believe what really messed up the Static Shock relaunch back in the New 52 was the fact that Dan Didio came in and wanted to disrespect the legacy of Dwayne McDuffie. Now, John Rossum, who was Dwayne McDuffie's roommate back in the days when he was getting ready to get started in the business, I think in the late 80s, he was a good friend of Dwayne McDuffie's, and he wanted to honor the legacy of Dwayne McDuffie, and he wanted to preserve the integrity of the character. However, DC Comics wanted to go in a different direction, and that's really one of the reasons why the new Static series fell completely apart. Was they wanted to go one way, but John Rossum wanted to keep the legacy of Dwayne McDuffie alive, and he wanted to preserve that legacy because this was one of his closest friends. And this is something that wasn't done, and I really didn't see much in a way of making efforts to honor Dwayne and many of the characters he created with this Milestone 2.0 as related to finding those creators who would go out of their way to honor Dwayne McDuffie's creations or Dwayne McDuffie's legacy. Now, if it was me who was running the Milestone relaunch, that would be one of the core foundations of the relaunch, was ensuring that Dwayne McDuffie's legacy was honored, that his characters stayed true to who they were and stayed true to what Dwayne McDuffie created them to be. Because I understand that I would want the same respect given to my characters like Isis or John Haynes, Eastine or Matilda Crowley or any other character I've created. And I would want someone who was working with my characters to show that respect to my material. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. It goes back to a tenet I live by from the Bible: do unto others as I would want them to do unto me. And I believe in doing unto other creators intellectual property as I want done unto mine. So that's something that really means something to me. And I would want to go out of my way to try to recruit that talent that's going to get people interested in the Milestone characters and interested in the brand. And also, I would have been out here trying to do some concept sheets and stuff like that, like I do for my books on my blog, to get people interested in the characters. And I believe that's something that really needs to be done, because when you have teaser images, this is what gets people excited about a book and starts anticipating it. Because just today I was doing the image letting people know that John Haynes' Dark Succubus is now available in paperback and it's going to be coming to Kindle on June 18th. And I got an extremely positive response from everyone, because I went out here and I put that image up, and everybody loved that image when they saw it. They saw that strong image of John Haynes. They saw that image of the succubus done by Mike Williams. Mike did a masterful job on that cover, and that cover is getting extremely positive response from everyone. And it's something that I'm really floored to see, because I wasn't expecting that much of a positive response. Thank you, Nightwing BMV1. Mike did an amazing job on that cover, and I have to say it's a masterpiece of a cover. And that's something that you want to do when you're launching a product, is you want to put that image up there that really gets people hooked and anticipating the product and getting ready to set money aside for the product. And with the Milestone 2.0 launch, they just said, oh, Milestone's coming back, but no images to show us updated costumes, no images to show us, an image of a story that you're going to tell about these characters, and nothing to really draw us in. It's just, oh, Milestone's coming back, but you have to give us a reason to go out here and buy the books. Luciano, do I think comics will exist 10 years from now? If they continue on this course, I don't think they're going to be mainstream like they are right now. I believe it's going to be a niche product, and it's going to be mostly distributed through print on demand, the way books by independent publishers are done by books. George has a question. Do I think black athletes have a bad model? And I don't believe black athletes have anything to do with the image of black male heroism. I think that when it comes down to the image of black male heroism, that's something we have to take responsibility for, all of us. It just can't be on athletes. It has to be on us too. And that's something we really all have to take responsibility for. George asked the question, how can black people create a more economical teamwork in the comic book industry? Well, when it comes down to black people, we have to learn how to work together. We have to learn that in order to achieve a common goal, we're all going to have to put aside our personal differences and work towards that common goal, which is reaching the larger black audience and building a platform where black people look at ourselves and see ourselves as valuable, see our work as valuable, and make efforts to go out here and support that work. And that's something I do in my own life, whether it be telling people about Mike Williams' Geek Sledge comic strip online, or going out here and putting in pledges for things like the Big Monty and the Lunatic Lunch Lady, which Chris Miller did the illustrations for, or a book like Agent Solo, where Raymond Leonard paid a beautiful tribute to 1990s comics and 1990s storytelling, and making efforts to share those comics with other people. When it comes down to black people, we have to start supporting our own work and sharing our own work, because that's the only way people are going to know about our work, is if we go out of our way to support each other and promote each other and build that audience for our product. That's the way we're going to get those positive black images out there. And that's how we're going to create a marketplace that changes the narrative as related to the black image and the black experience. That's something that we all need to do. And it's something that, again, I do in my own personal life. And I will always, if I see a very strong, positive black product, like Chris Brown's Omega Black, I'm going to let everybody know about that product because I know how much money goes into those products. And I know that a lot of these guys, this is a passion project for them. And a lot of those guys, this is something that they need that support on, whether it be somebody like Chris Brown with Omega Black or um, Raymond Leonard with Agent Solo or Mike Williams with Deke Sledge or the creators of the Black Sands manga. All of those black creators deserve our support. And they are out here making some of the best comics I have seen since the days of Milestone Comics. They are out here really putting together some well-crafted stories and some well-developed stories. They're out here putting out great work. And that work really needs more promotion. I mean, that the thing that sells books is word of mouth. And this is something I know as a publishing professional who has been in the industry for a good 15, 20 years, that if you can't generate that word of mouth, then the book isn't going to be able to go out here and sell, because there's only so much an author can do as related to selling. I mean, I can go out here and put the links in Facebook and make the YouTube videos and make the YouTube ads, but it's the what's on the page that's going to sell the story. And we really need people who, if you've enjoyed a story, do things like put up a review on Amazon, or do things like tell your friends about that book, or share that book with your friends, because that's what's going to help that book sell, and that's what's going to help that author continue reaching a larger audience. And that's the stuff that's going to help the overall industry grow as related to the black image. That's something we all have to do. We have to work together towards changing the black image, because I believe we all can change the black image, because I see many of these black creators, these young brothers and sisters, they're making hard efforts to do that. I mean, I remember when I went to the Black Comic Con at the library, it just was a lot of positive energy in that room. And you saw all those brothers and sisters out there creating all of these positive images, all of these diverse images. And I believe that couldn't have been done without Milestone Media laying that foundation for all of those brothers and sisters way back in the days when I was in my 20s in college. If it wasn't for Milestone laying that foundation, we wouldn't see black fantasy and science fiction where it is right now. And that's one of the things that I found to be incredibly sad when I heard about the feud between Charlotte McDuffie and the creators and founders of Milestone Media. Is they are out here having this lawsuit, and they don't see the impact they had on all of these young brothers and sisters who grew up with their comics. And a lot of these people, brothers and sisters, they were inspired by those comics. And it's sad that they cannot partake with a Milestone 2.0 because they're too busy fighting with each other and not really thinking about the bigger picture as related to the impact of Milestone Comics on everyone. And I believe that this is something that, again, could easily be resolved, because if a professional like myself, publishing professional like myself, can see the solution, then DC could have easily resolved this, and the creators themselves could have resolved this, because, again, I believe that fair compensation needs to be given to Dwayne McDuffie's widow, and let's get these comics back to the marketplace, because if the industry is suffering, then we need to make efforts to try to heal it, not exacerbate the wound. Because they announced this in 2018, not 2018, 2015, and here it is 2019, and it's sad that we don't have any Milestone comics on the marketplace, and everybody's talking about all of this diversity, but there's nobody out here really making efforts to bring one of the brands that really gave us that diversity of thought back to the marketplace. And that's one of those things that I found to be quite troubling as related to this feud. And that's something I found to be really troubling as related to the whole feud between the estate and the overall business. Because, well, with somebody who understands the business, I think that there could have been, again, a really good resolution to this, and we should be able to get comics out there. I mean, every time when it comes down to Black people in business, what's really sad is we see people fighting with each other, and that's something that we shouldn't see as related to the business. What's up, Mobar7170? Glad to see you in the live stream. Tonight we're talking about Milestone Media 2.0's fall and Black people working together. And I was talking about why Black people do need to work together, because it's something we need to do. Because when it comes down to whether it be this comic book business or Black-owned business, we have to start really putting our feelings aside, because there is a greater goal here. I mean, we've seen Johnson Media fall, and we've seen Milestone, sadly, not be able to pick up the pieces. And we have a new day here in New Black Media. And in that day of New Black Media, I would love to see more people working together, because that's something I do with other creators, whether it be Raymond Leonard that I was working with just this week. I was just promoting his Agent Solo with a review, or a couple of weeks ago I did it with Chris L. Brown's Omega Black. I do that because I want to see other brothers rise. I want to see their projects get momentum, and I want to see these products, these properties grow and be big, not only with Black audiences, but with international audiences as well, because all of the foundations are there for you to reach a larger marketplace. And it's just a thing of us capitalizing on the opportunity. And this is something that we really need to start focusing on. And the only way we can do that, again, is if we work together. And that's something that I want to see more creators do, because all the infighting, it doesn't work. Now, somebody had dropped a comment as related to Kwanzaa. And when I look at Kwanzaa, I saw a situation there where, yeah, I have an issue with the way that brother makes his comics, that he doesn't really put a lot of quality into it. But when I take a look at your Kwanzaa, I saw myself back in the 1990s when I was first starting out. Now, I remember back in about 94, 95, I was doing the first John Haynes story, The Changing Soul, and I didn't know anything about writing. I didn't know anything about storytelling. I mean, I had some promise as a writer, but I didn't really have the guidance. And I believe a guy like him, he needs guidance and support. Yes, he has a passion for comics, but what he really needs is somebody to give him guidance in terms of business and how to conduct yourself in business. Because when I take a look at the way many of the people in Comicsgate are treating him, they are treating him like a joke. Yes, they are supporting his Kickstarters by making pledges, but what they're doing is making a mockery of this man, and they're using him to be entertainment. Basically, they see him in the way they see a coon. They see him basically as a joke. And yes, he's getting his projects funded, but what they're doing is making a mockery of this man. And that's something that a seasoned professional like myself, what I would do is take that brother aside and say, hey, they're making a fool out of you. And what they're doing is, yes, they're making videos roasting you and mocking you. And you need to really start taking a look at your work and start looking at your craft, because what they want to do is, yeah, you're getting your projects funded, but what audience are you reaching? Because the audience that you're reaching does not respect your work. And what you want to do when you're a creator is reach an audience that respects your work. Yeah, you're making money, but the whole thing is you're losing as related to the intangible of your dignity, the intangible of your self-respect, and your work is seen as a laughing stock. Moreover, what these guys in the comic skate are doing with your work is using it as an excuse not to support other good black creators out there, black creators like myself, who are creating balanced images, and brothers like Raymond Leonard, who are creating balanced images, and Chris Brown making balanced images. They then go out here and say that, oh, black creators make bad comics, when in actuality, I can name 4 or 5 brothers who make very good comics, and comics that if I saw them on a rack on a shelf, I would buy those comics every Wednesday if they were available. But what these guys in Comicsgate and what some of these comic shop owners want to do is they want to passively say we stock black comics by taking a guy like Kwanzaa's work and putting it on their shelves, but aggressively then use the failure of Kwanzaa's books as an excuse not to stock the work of other brothers out there. So what they want to do is use Kwanzaa as a barometer for black products, but it's a false barometer of black products because, yes, he manages to get the attention of these guys in Comicsgate and many of these white comic shop owners, but those people are using that brother and making a complete fool out of him and using him as a way to keep other black creators out of the comic shops and the comic book business. And that's where I see the racism right there. They'll sit there and talk about how your Kwanzaa is this pro-black, but what they are doing is racist in trying to keep other black creators out of the business. And when I was listening to that comment, I was like, yeah, I would try to help Kwanzaa out by trying to explain what people are doing to him and how they are trying to long-term keep other black people out of the industry by using him as the measure for the success of other black creators. Because other black creators out here, they're putting together some really solid stuff out here. And that stuff, those comics, they are some of the best comics, again, I have seen in a long time. I mean, when I went to that show at the New York Public Library, at the Schomburg Library, I saw some really good comics at that library. And I wish I could have bought more. All I bought was Black Sands and Nowhere Man, but I wish I had more money because I would have bought more stuff. And if I ever got a chance to get a table at one of those shows, I would be showcasing my own work there. But when I look at what they're doing, they want to make Kwanzaa into the barometer to hurt other creators and deny them an opportunity. And again, that's something that all black creators, we have to start working together. And part of working together is letting guys like Kwanzaa know what the game is and actually work with him towards improving his craft, because he looks like he may have some decent ideas, but he needs to learn how to execute. And that's something a lot of writers, they don't know how to do when they're young. Because I remember in my 20s, I didn't really know. I had like really great ideas. I mean, I would get feedback on books like Changing Soul and The First ISIS. I would get incredibly positive feedback, but I didn't know how to execute too well until I started reading books like Sid Field's Screenplay and Robert McKee's Story. Once I started reading those books, I started really honing my craft. And that's how I started going from writing books that were kind of sort of there, like The First ISIS, to writing a book that was quality, like the Cassandra Cookbook, all the way up to a screenplay that was praised, All About Maryland, to a book that everybody praises, The Temptation of John Haynes, and then later on to the Thetas and other books in the ISIS series. What I did was I learned how to take my lumps, take the criticism, and I learned how to hone my craft and learn how to write in different styles and different approaches. I had a best-selling author friend. She would read my blogs, and she encouraged me to go out here and start writing nonfiction, those books like Stop Simping. That was a result of me working on social media with a best-selling author friend. And it was Mike Williams who was very instrumental in helping me get the John Haynes series up. He encouraged me to do a book about John Haynes. He said that there was a desperate need for a story where we featured a positive image of a black man. And that's what led to me writing A Conversation with Death. And after he had encouraged me, I went out and I hired him to do the cover because it was him who gave me the idea for the project. And I want to keep doing those type of stories because it's very important for us to see a positive images of black people and especially positive images of black men. Joshua Davis asks, how do you write comics with a balanced storyline about the black experience dealing with racism without having hardcore comic fans call it an SJW storyline? Well, when it comes down to writing those kind of stories, you have to really approach them from an objective perspective. And I've written stories about the black experience dealing with racism, and I did that in part in The Temptation of John Haynes. I wrote a couple of chapters in the second act dealing with racism, and you couldn't call the chapters I did SJW. There are chapters where John Haynes, as the CEO of Morris Phillips, is racially profiled in the Morris Market, a business that is in the lobby of the Morris Phillips Tower. And I handle that situation very sensitively. And then I show, in contrast, Eastine getting racially profiled at a lingerie store where she's buying lingerie. Now, in the scenarios I did with Temptation of John Haynes, what I did was show how racism affects black men, and I showed how racism affects black women. And with both of the experiences, it leads to both of them becoming emotional. And it really shows you how being separated shows how the divide between racism between black men and black women leads to that divide. And it also shows how racism can lead to black men and black women lashing out at each other. So when I did The Temptation of John Haynes and I showed how racism affects black men and black women, I show how black men and black women experience racism in different situations, how they can become emotional as a result of their experiences, and I show how racism can lead to black men and black women fighting each other. And with that story, I show how you get the divide. But then as the second act ends, I show you how Eastine and John work through their differences and then work together to change the culture of Morris Phillips, a corporation that has a racist culture, and he makes efforts to change that culture by taking constructive action. That's what John does with in the pages of The Temptation of John Haynes. And you could never call John Haynes an SJW story because it presents racism from a balanced perspective, because I not only show white on black racism, but I show intra-racism as well, with John Haynes having to deal with class racism from this Eric Tuttleson who fires him in the first chapter. So it's how you approach it and how you deal with it. Now, another book where I showed racism that you couldn't call it SJW was the book ISIS Imitation of Life. Now, in ISIS Imitation of Life, which was a book that I wrote to pay tribute to the golden age of superheroes, I tackled the issues of racism and Jim Crow, and I did it in a way that showed you how black people were held back from actualizing their potential because of racism and Jim Crow. And I showed how black people lived and were heroes, not by going out here and being a superhero to save the world, but by going out here and living their best lives possible and presenting a positive example that refuted many of the racist narratives as related to what they were presenting out here towards black people. So in Imitation of Life, I show you an image of tackling race and race relations, and I show it in a way that you could not call it an SJW story. It was a story about the dark period of the 1930s, and I show you that there were black people out here who owned businesses, owned homes. There were towns that were black. And this was something that I did to show the impact of racism without people calling it an SJW story. There was no way you could call either of those stories SJW stories, nor could you call the first ISIS an SJW story, because that story dealt with ISIS and dealing with white supremacy. And you couldn't call those SJW stories because there is no victim narrative. It is about black people dealing with the issue of racism and not being victims, but finding ways to survive in those, as related to those experiences. And that's something that I believe people need to see more of, because when it comes down to the SJW comic books, they present things from a very paternalistic view, and they present things as related to making black people as victims. And that's not who we are. It's never been who we are. It is how people see black through a white lens. And we really need to show stories from our experience which show that we weren't victims, and we always found a way to survive, and we always found a way to adapt to any dark situation. So that's something that I want to see, and that's how you not create an SJW story. And if you really want to learn how to write those type of stories, you have to pick up books like The Temptation of John Haynes, or ISIS Imitation of Life, or the first ISIS, because they show that balanced picture. And when you approach any sort of story with racism, you have to really take a really hard and critical look at it. And what I do whenever I'm writing about race or racism, I always try to give you a balanced picture to show you how people are being held back as it relates to racism, and how it prevents all of society from actualizing its potential. Okay. Bombor, I don't know about people spending $1,000 per week for YouTube, but they probably want to do that because they hear that YouTube makes so much money. But I guess certain content creators can make that money. But I can tell you from what I make, it's not that much. But it's not enough to make a paycheck or a monthly salary. But if they want to do that, they can do that. Luciano, I don't know if America's going back to segregation, but people naturally segregate anyway. Man of Action, they weren't asking much for Milestone. They weren't trying to sell the company. What they were trying to do was relaunch the company. Unfortunately, they couldn't relaunch the company because they did not contact Dwayne McDuffie's widow, and they did not negotiate a deal with Dwayne McDuffie's widow. So the intellectual property is still in the air, and DC and Milestone, they are feuding. Not DC and Milestone, the McDuffie estate and the Milestone founders are feuding. And because of that, we can't get any comics from DC Comics. So if the issue is the two partners, and this was gone in depth in comicbookdebate.com's article, which talked about Milestone. And I think I'm going to try to, okay, I can get the link up. And that's something that, as I see it, it was just too much bickering and arguing. That was absolutely unnecessary, because I believe that there could have been a positive resolution to the whole situation as related to Milestone. And I believe that there could have been a positive resolution to the whole situation that could have led to all the parties benefiting economically from the whole relaunch, man. I believe that a lot of jobs were lost as a result of this, because there were a lot of talented artists out there I think could have really done something great with those characters. And I think that there could have been a lot of great writers who would have been able to really work with those characters. I mean, if I got the chance to, I would love to work with Static or Icon, or, okay, we got a troll. All right, thank you, Wrestling Superstar, for dealing with that troll. But this could have been resolved, and I believe there's an easy resolution to this. But everybody's got to get out of their feelings, because when it comes down to black people, we tend to not work together. We tend to think of ourselves as individuals. We don't think of ourselves as a group. And I don't know, Man of Action, if anybody's talking to McDuffie's widow, but I know that she filed a lawsuit. But there really should have been efforts to bring her in from day one. I mean, from one thing that they said in the article was, I think they said something about they were talking about things at Dwayne McDuffie's funeral. And if they did that, that was really disrespectful. And this fight is just, I see it as something that shouldn't have gone on. I mean, this is something that, I mean, Dwayne had a great passion for comic books and superheroes, and I think he would have wanted to see his characters shared with a new generation of readers. And this is something that I think people would have wanted to go out here and see out here. They would have wanted to see, he would have wanted to see his characters shared with that next generation of brothers and sisters out there. And it's sad that the generation before doesn't see the value of his work or the impact of his work. And that's something that I think everybody really needs to take a look at as related to things, because these characters, they had a major impact, again, on a lot of kids out here, and those kids who grew up with them. That's why we are seeing this major effort to, go out here and make characters. Hey, Chris Brown is the creator of Omega Black, one of the mangas I was talking about, and he has created this great manga, Omega Black, and you should go out here and get it. It's on Comixology, and it's on Amazon in paperback. It's an awesome manga. And again, I promote it because I want to see him get that audience, and I want to see him get those readers. And every guy who talks about comics, they need to share this manga, because this is one of the best comics out there. Yeah. Thank you, Man of Action. Yeah, every one of those Milestone heroes is a classic. They're icons, and they should have been a collective effort to keep his vision and his legacy going. I mean, if I were running DC Comics, or I had an opportunity to buy the rights to those characters, I would want to honor Dwayne's legacy, and I would want to honor everything that he has produced and created by telling stories that stay true to those characters. I mean, if I were to get a hold of them and put them in the SJS Direct universe, I would want to create stories that really showcase what make these characters great. And that's something that I really wish that everybody involved as related to Milestone would have done, because they should have thought about, Dwayne loved comic books, he loved superheroes, he loved the business. But what I see as related to the comic book industry that really troubles me about the comic book industry is that we don't really respect the people who create all these great characters. When it comes down to many of the people who create these great characters, they really make efforts to crap on those people and their legacies. And this is something that has been done ever since the days of guys like Jack Kirby. And that's why there's a saying, don't get in the comics because it'll break your heart. But why should it break your heart? I mean, people like myself who are on the literary side, yeah, we know that it's a hard road, but it shouldn't have to break your heart. I mean, comics should be fun, but when I look at the business, there's this dark side to it where people get greedy, people get in their feelings, and they make these great characters, but then they don't treat the people who create them in a way that shows respect for their hard work. Either they don't try to compensate them fairly for their work, or they take the legacy of their work and they trash it the way Dan Didio has trashed the entire DC universe, because he doesn't like certain characters and certain stories. He goes out of his way to destroy those characters, and that alienates readers. And that's something that I really find troubling about the comic book industry, because there's no need to trash these characters or trash their legacies. there really needs to be a way to show respect to creators, because that's something I do when I'm working with artists. I always try to show them respect. I always try to give them professionalism. And that's something that I would think that should be a model and a standard, because in trade publishing, there's always an effort in many cases to show respect to other authors and other creators. I mean, editors, if they have a book that they know that they can't sell anymore, they will let the rights revert back to that writer, and then that writer can go out here and make their own work. That's what my best-selling author friend did when all of her books were going out of print. She got all the rights back to her books, and she was able to go out here and make ebooks of her books. And she asked me to do the conversion for several of them. And I was able to help her get back to the marketplace. And she's selling books right now on Amazon and Smashwords. And we really needed to see that type of ability to work together. And that's something that I was proud of doing, being able to help her get her work to the marketplace. And it wasn't about feelings. It was about getting her books back to the marketplace. She got her rights back, and she got her books back in the marketplace, and they've sold exceptionally well over the last 8 or 9 years. And that's the type of teamwork we need to see. That's the type of synergy we need to see as related to the comic book business. And sadly, we don't see that. We see a lot of infighting, feuding, and backbiting. And we don't really need to have these characters or the creators have to go through that. I mean, I look at it as you shouldn't be all this feuding and infighting in a professional business. Okay, if we're not selling a product and it's just sitting there, we just need to let the author have their product and let other intellectual property as we go on to other intellectual properties. And if they make money with it, then that's fine. And if not, oh well, okay, it's not in my house. And that's something that needs to be done. I mean, a professional, they are thinking about the overall business and maintaining an amicable relationship, because in the romance publishing business, everything remains amicable. I mean, people are extremely professional. If books don't sell, authors, they get their rights back. And even in the children's business, it's the exact same thing. In trade publishing, people get their rights back, people move on. And then if they want to take it print on demand, or they want to take it to Kindle, then they can just take that book over to Kindle and have it be a revenue stream, for them. And that's something that I would love to see done in the comic book business. I mean, people being a bit more professional, people being a bit more courteous, because when I look at, the modern comic book business, and I see the behaviors of some of these people on social media, it's extremely unprofessional, it's extremely rude, and it doesn't really give people incentive to go out here and buy product when you hear things like many of these so-called SJW comic pros attacking fans online, or what I hear with this Milestone situation with these rights in limbo because of a lawsuit. And what's really sad is because of this, this is what impeded the industry from growing, because people themselves, they continue to act immature instead of trying to come to a level of maturity and professionalism towards the way they conduct business. Because as I see it, you want to do what's in the best interest of the business, and you want to try to maintain that diplomacy and that amicable situation, because you want people saying good things so that they can go out here and buy your products. And when they see a professional acting professionally, that really gives people confidence to go out here and buy those comics and continue supporting those characters to the point where we can get things like, say, a static action figure, because I'd love to have an icon and some of the other Milestone characters to go along with this character. And I'd like to have a bigger one, because it's a shame that static is so small in comparison to a Namor. I mean, this is just egregious here, but I would love to see them work things out, because there was a bunch of money to be made, because a lot of people bought this static action figure, and we'd love to buy more of that merchandise, but it's just that Black folks have to learn how to work together and work together towards taking care of business, because we're all we have with each other, and we are all that have each other, and we need to support each other and really work towards a constructive solution, because we need more positive Black images out here. We need to see more balanced images, more humanized images, and more images that give us a diversity of ideas and a diversity of thoughts, and show us that there is not just one Black experience which comes out of the ghetto, but that Black experience is diverse, and there's diversity of thought as related to Black people, Black cultures, and the Black experience overall, because that's not something we're getting from many of these publishers these days. I mean, most publishers out here, as related to mainstream, they're not going to go out here and give you a Black goth like Spinsterella, and they're not going to give you, African American fantasy like the ISIS series or the East Team series. They're not going to give you this type of content, and it's clear to me that there is a marketplace for it, because we see it at the Comic Cons. We see so many more brothers and sisters going to Comic Con. With the New York Comic Con, I remember 2017 I went and I saw so many brothers and sisters at the con, and that audience is growing, and that audience wants product, and it's mostly independent creators like myself, Chris Brown, and many others. We're the one, and Raymond Leonard and Mike, we're the guys creating the content, and Chris Miller, we're creating the content, and we need to see more people creating the content, and it's a shame that Milestone can't be a part of that. And that's something that I wish Milestone could be a part of, because they created all this and they laid the foundation for it, and they should have been able to build on it just like every other brother and sister is built on it. Mobar 7170. I'd have to look into Hotshot. I haven't seen that character, but they could do something with him. Yeah, they could do something with him. He'd be an interesting character to explore in the hands of a right writer, someone who did the research on Morocco and Black culture in Morocco. In the right hands of a writer, he could be very fascinating. And that's the whole thing with a lot of these characters that are a part of DC and Marvel. A lot of these Black characters, I believe, in the hands of a great writer like Christopher Priest, they could be taken to the next level, because it was Christopher Priest who took Black Panther to another level with his incredible run on the character. And I believe another Black writer could take that type of character, or any character, to another level. Make a good point, Man of Action. Yeah, you have to come out of the box, because what you get of these Gordon Good brothers and these neutered heroes, or even the buried heroes. Because I remember with Monica Rambeau, she was just starting to come into herself, and she was starting to actualize her potential, and then Marvel buried her character. And yeah, they are not out here petitioning the idea that Black or gay, or what they did with Jim Rhodes and making him into a simp. And it shows me the importance of a character like a John Haynes, and why it's important to support like Dark Succubus. I'm leaving a link for that in the chat, and that's available in paperback right now. So if you want to see strong, masculine Black male characters, you have to support a lot of the independent Black creators like myself, because that's the only way you're going to get those type of stories. And that's what Dark Succubus gives you: a strong image of a Black man, a strong, balanced image of a Black man, and it refutes a lot of those stereotypes. So that's now available in paperback, and it's coming to Kindle Unlimited on July 18th. So Marvel's not going to give you that. Usually, when it comes down to Black characters, again, we usually get these emasculated guys, or you get them buried when they start showing strength, and that's what they do. They bury the characters. I talked about that in a video where I talked about how many of these characters wound up getting buried, and just as they're starting to get their momentum, they wind up with that momentum cut. And the only way you can get to see those characters get their momentum is through an independent Black creator. Yeah, that's true, Man of Action. Yeah, the new leadership at Marvel, yeah, they just their ideas of diversity. I say they're really twisted. I mean, Sana Amina, I think she's in her own world, and CB Sobolski, I don't know what's wrong with him, but his ideas of diversity really they're like watching old 1970s Different Strokes episodes, and they don't really give you that balanced picture of things that we got from Milestone. I mean, Milestone really gave us that balanced picture of the Black community. It showed us every aspect of it, and I really, and that was one of the things I enjoyed about their stories was we just didn't get the ghetto. We also got Black middle class with Kurt Metcalf. No, he was upper middle class. We got Icon, who was a part of the Black community and showed the history of the Black community, and we got Static, who was a part of the Black middle class, the son of a working class guy. We got to see a Black boy who came from a 2-parent household, and we really got to see again different aspects, different experiences, and we didn't just get the ghetto, and we really didn't get a whole bunch of old narratives as related to victimization. We got all aspects of Black life and the Black experience, and that was one of those things that made Milestone one of the great brands as related to publishing. I mean, it had a major impact on everyone, and I would wish it could have been able to launch that 2.0 so it could have a further impact on the next generation of readers out there. And what's really great is we're seeing so many brothers and sisters out there, including myself, continuing to pick up that baton, whether it be African American fantasy, African American science fiction, African American manga, or independent Black owned comic books. They're picking up the baton. And even though Milestone 2.0 wasn't able to launch, we're seeing more and more brothers and sisters out here launching their own projects and reaching audiences of readers across the globe. We're all out here, and that's really shows, everything that Dwayne McDuffie did had an impact on the next generation. And I really wish we could have seen, the Milestone characters come back. And that's something I wish we could see, because I know myself, if I were able to buy those rights, I could see an ISIS Static crossover, a John Haynes Icon crossover, or even an ISIS Icon crossover. And I really would love to write those type of stories. And I think we could have a lot of fun doing those type of stories. And Cedric H., yeah, you make a good point. Yeah, somebody would have to buy those rights and publish them under another company. Unfortunately, when it comes down to those rights, they're tied up because you have Dwayne McDuffie's widow feuding with Cowan, Hudlin, and the others there. So they're all feuding, and sadly, these properties are in limbo, and they're missing out on a window of great opportunity, because that would have been one of the ways that, okay, we got another troll. We're going to have to deal with this guy. Yeah, I know Reginald Hudlin. Yeah, he's mostly responsible. I mean, I've heard things about him, but he's trying to go about business the wrong way, Hardcore H. And I look at his approach to business, and he's trying to take things too fast. I mean, I believe he's thinking that he's going to go to TV and movies, but it takes time to go out here and get things done. And he doesn't understand things about business as related to 3 to 5 year plans. When you're in business, you want a 3 to 5 year plan to get your property to build that audience. And then what you want to do as you're building your audience is then start working towards licensing and then merchandising. And then you can start working on going out here and getting those TV shows and those movies and those developmental deals. And he's trying to put the cart before the horse And that's what led to the complete disintegration of Milestone 2.0. And again, they really need somebody with a business background, somebody who understands how business works, and somebody who's a visionary who can lay out that 3 to 5 year plan. And somebody who understands modern media, things like social media and how it can be used. And we need that type of individual to work on building Milestone's business, because as I see it right now, yes, you've got the original owners, but they really don't understand the business of publishing, and that's where a publishing professional comes in and really starts to lay things out. Because I heard about one of their books they wanted to launch, which was one of these so-called SJW books featuring a heroine, and the whole thing is that book would have not been successful, and it wouldn't have sold because they weren't really thinking about things as related to core audience, age groups you're targeting. I think about all those things when I launch a book. When I'm sitting there thinking about whether I want to launch a book, I'm thinking about what audience I want to sell it to, what customers bases I'm going for. For example, when I was doing Spinsterella, I thought about the core audiences of Black women in the goth subculture, and women in the goth subculture. So I had 3 core audiences that I wanted to target. And the same thing when I'm doing books like the ISIS series and the Eastern series, I'm always thinking about audiences, and I try to make books that appeal to both women and men. So I always have a core audience of what I want to go for whenever I'm designing a book, or before I even put fingers to the keyboard. Like, for example, I'm getting ready to do a new vampire story, Eternal Night, which is about Black vampires. And that's one where I'm thinking about, again, Black audience, the fantasy audience. And again, I have core audiences that I want to target before I go out here and put fingers to the keyboard. And you have to have that kind of business plan before you go out here and write a story. Sup, Flavor Genuine, glad to see you here. And Hardcore H, you make a good point. We do need Static over Black Lightning because he could reach younger audiences and younger customers, and he was already a popular character. And what they did with the Black Lightning show, it's not a show that anybody wants to watch because it's just too filled with identity politics. But we need a Static show, but not with Greg Berlanti Productions. We need one with somebody who really understands the character, somebody who cares about the character, and somebody who wants to tell really balanced stories with the character. That's somebody who I would want to see, running the Static character as a showrunner or as a creator who takes over the character. Hardcore H, I already commented on the Batwoman trailer in last week's live stream, and I roasted it up super crispy. But I'll do another video next week commenting on the Batwoman trailer all by itself. But I went in depth with that as related to DC Comics properties and their inability to really get things together. And as I look at it, the situation with Milestone 2.0 is another case of DC not being able to get it together. And that's really sad because they could have really had an impact if they were to have launched that Milestone 2.0. Looks like we got 46 likes. We're 4 away from 50. Let's get those likes up. If we get 4 more likes, again, that really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and it really helps, get this channel noticed by people. So, but let's get those likes up. We can get 50. Would really appreciate it. But that's what but when I look at it, it's like, yeah, we really need, with Static, he's a great character that could really go out here and take it to the next level. I believe he could be the next big character in the right hands and the right writer. And I see a lot of potential for that character, but he's stuck in liberal. But thank you, Flavor Genuine. I really appreciate the donation. But I would like to do I'm going to have to do a roast of this Batwoman because people have been asking me to do a roast of this Batwoman. So I'm going to have to do that video. even though I talked about it in the live stream, because there's so much wrong with that whole adaptation that it's not funny. Mobar 7178, yeah, a broad fan base does give you more to work with, and you can explore different concepts and different stories. And I'm not going to react to the Bernie Sanders photo, Luciano, because that's just a minstrel image, and it's par for the course as related to the mainstream media, and it gives me no reason to vote for Bernie Sanders. So when it comes down to Bernie Sanders, I know he's a joke, and he's nobody that I would vote for or be concerned with. Now, when it comes down to, yeah, you do need that broad fan base, and that's something I've been trying to build with the ISIS series and the E-Steam series. I've been, trying to build that audience. E-Steam, to my surprise, is a little bit more popular than ISIS, and I've been building the fan base, international fan base, for about a good 7-8 years with these books, and trying to build that audience, because I know that there's an audience out there. And I've been building it with other books like the Spinsterella trilogy books, and even books like The Temptation of John Haynes and the John Haynes series. So I know there's an international audience out there, because I recently got a sale for Man Who Rules the World in Germany, and I've gotten sales on books in the ISIS series in countries all across the globe. So I know that there's an international audience for Black heroes, and there's an international audience for Black fantasy, and I've gotten that from Canada, the UK, Germany, Japan. Thank you very much for the donation, Wrestling Superstar 83, and thank you for moderating the chat room. Really appreciate all the things you've been doing, and thank you for the donation again. If you guys want to donate to the Super Chat, you can do so as well. It helps me out a lot. It helps me pay for the covers on books like ISIS and E-Steam. It helps me pay artists like Bill Walko to design the covers for these books. And it also helps me hire artists like Mike Williams, who designed the beautiful cover for the legendary Mad Matilda, the cover for John Haynes' A Conversation with Death, and the incredible cover for John Haynes' Dark Succubus, which you can pick up a paperback copy today on Amazon.com by clicking the link in the chat, or you can pre-order a Kindle version by heading over to Amazon as well. So Mike Williams did the cover for legendary Mad Matilda, and he also did the cover for A Conversation with Death. And I wouldn't have been able to pay for those covers without you guys' support. And I'm getting ready to do the next book in the John Haynes series. I already have it in the middle of the second draft, John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. And I'm getting ready to try to get artists in line. I want to do something crazy this time. I want to do 2 covers. I want to do one by Mike Williams and another one possibly by Josh Howard. So I want to do 2 covers for that one. And I want to launch that book maybe later this year or part 2020. I want to be part of the late 2019 fall or the spring 2020 catalog. So those your donations pay for those covers and help me get those books out to the marketplace. And that's something I'm trying to do, in addition to trying to get this ISIS graphic novel off the ground. Working on that very slowly. And if you guys donate to the Patreon, that'll help me every way, because I figure with 10,000 subscribers and everybody donates $1, we can go out here and get this book, graphic novel, to the marketplace. And that's something I would love to see get done, because I always wanted to publish comics ever since I was 9 years old. And that's something that I would love to get out to you guys. So that's a long-term goal, but I'm still working on it, still persevering, still fighting. And I'm still trying to get these books to the marketplace, because I understood what Dwayne McDuffie's legacy was and how important it was. Because if it wasn't for Dwayne McDuffie going out here and working with these brothers, Dennis Cowan and Michael Davis and Derek Dingle, we wouldn't have had Milestone Media, and Milestone Media would not have transformed the Black image, because that was a golden age as related to Black media, I'd say from about 1984 all the way up until about 1995, 96, we saw so much diversity of Black images and Black experience. I mean, we had the Hudlin Brothers with House Party. We had all Mario Van Peebles with New Jack City. We had the Cosby Show. We had rock, and we had this rich tapestry of different Black culture and Black experience. And that's something that I would love to see come back to comic books, because in addition to Milestone, we had Unia, we had many of these other small independent creators. And if it wasn't for those creators, we wouldn't have seen a complete change in the Black image overall. I don't know about any good books on Bumblebee. She's always been a supporting character. They've done some work with her give you an Easter egg. What can you expect with an ISIS graphic novel? The ISIS graphic novel will be a lot like the stories that I do. Like the story is actually based on All That Glitters and another story, Esteem No Good Deed. So what you can expect is the art like this. Bill Walko would give you art like this in the comic, and his art really pops. People love his art. So this is the kind of art you would get in an ISIS graphic novel. If I were able to get it funded, you would get this kind of art, and I would love to get this to you. It's going to be bright. It's going to have a lot of energy. It's going to pop, and that's what I want to give you guys in a graphic novel. I really wanted to give you guys, a book that is really strong, really powerful, because Bill Walko's art is extremely strong, and it has that powerful first impression on you. And I believe if I could get the first ISIS graphic novel out, I could try to work towards getting more comics out. And I've had people ask me, to create a John Haynes comic, and I would love to start working on that script and try to maybe do something, maybe with a Conversation with Death adaptation. And I would love to get a comic out here, but it's just comics cost a lot more to publish than books. So it's something I'm trying to work on. I might try to, if I can get enough money, start with the Esteem No Good Deed script first, so that everybody can see a teaser of what the images are going to look like and what the panels are going to look like, because I've seen Bill's art on comics, and it's extremely strong, and I would love to give him an opportunity to really just work with my characters and really showcase his ability, because he does a great job on these covers. I mean, this is one of these are two of his best covers, and you should see Escape from Transylvania or Bride of Dracula. Bride of Dracula is one of the best-selling ISIS series books ever. I mean, and thank you, Mobar7170, for joining the Patreon. I really appreciate it. But he really, Bride of Dracula was one of those best. It was the best-selling ISIS book right now. I mean, people love that story. They love the action in that story, and they love everything about that story, and they just keep buying it. And I believe it's due to Bill Walko's great cover. I mean, his cover is so strong on that book that people, they just automatically go out there. When they see it, they pick it up almost immediately. So that's one I want to give you guys in the comic. I really want to give you guys an incredible comic book experience. I really want you to really get that really great art, and I want to give you a story that is just like the ones you would see in the ISIS series. So if you pick up a book like ISIS, All That Glitters, or Esteem Goddess of, I want to give you stories that capture the spirit of what's in the prose, in the pages of the pictures, because a lot of people say that my storytelling is a lot like a comic book, and that's something that I would love to share with you guys. I just need to have the time to go out here and raise the funds to do it. So it's about almost 2 hours now. We get ready to wrap up the stream in about 4 or 5 minutes. So if you guys have any questions about Milestone, or you want to ask anything about publishing Black comics, you can ask me in the last 5 minutes. But I'm going to get ready to wrap up this stream in about a couple of minutes, because I gotta get back to work on 2020's ISIS story, which is ISIS the Main Event, where the goddess next door is going to be entering the world of wrestling. And this is one where I wanted people to learn about the wrestling business and learn about everything as related to pro wrestling. So I did a lot of research for this one, been watching a lot of wrestling matches, and I've been trying to, explore concepts like booking and setting up segments and things as related to pro wrestling so that people could understand things as related to how things go in the world of wrestling. And what I saw that was troubling in the comic book industry, where they tried to do something like wrestling, was with Tom King. And they were making it look like Tom King was fired from the Batman comic. And now people are saying that it's some sort of worked shoot. And this is something that really irritated me, because it shows that the comic book industry isn't something that's filled with ethical people. You don't jerk people around in an industry that is losing readers, and comic shops are closing. And I found that to be quite unethical, because no publisher should be doing things like working shoots like wrestlers and jerking the audience around. A professional publisher understands that there's a line as related to conduct, and that's something that really irritated me when I heard about what happened with Tom King. But with your Bloodsport, my favorite wrestlers, it's hard to say. I liked Edge. I liked John Cena. I liked Eddie Guerrero, the late Eddie Guerrero. I really loved his wrestling. And this story, the main event, comes out of my love for pro wrestling, because I grew up in the days of Hulk Hogan and Rock and wrestling, and I used to really enjoy watching wrestling. I like Mark Henry and Ric Flair, Luciano, but Mark Henry is fun to watch, but I used to like to watch a lot of guys who were on the mic, like The Rock. I have a Rock figures I still have. I love the way The Rock would perform in the ring, and I used to like Stone Cold, but I used to like a whole bunch of it. I used to watch a lot of wrestling. I mean, I watched the days of the golden age of wrestling with Hulk Hogan. I watched Saturday Night's Main Event back in the day, and I watched a lot of 90s wrestling with WCW, and I watched the Attitude Era, and watched a lot of it up until about 2007, 2008, when they stopped running SmackDown, and I watched a lot of wrestling. So what I wanted to do with the main event was take you into the world of wrestling, because I already did ISIS, the Ultimate Fight, which took you into the world of a UFC type situation, where ISIS was fighting the Greek goddess Nemesis, and there were some wrestling overtones in that story. And in this one, I wanted to take people into the world of pro wrestling, and I wanted to create this fictional wrestling federation where ISIS is going to take on Nemesis again, but there's a special guest who's looking to interrupt in the match. So I'm really having a lot of fun writing this story. I had to work out a major kink as related to the second act, but I'm getting towards the third act of the story in the first draft, and I want to get that one to you guys in 2020, and then I want to start work on Eternal Night and then another E-Steam story. But I've got the John Haynes story, John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. That's in the second draft of editing, and I'm trying to get the books together for the 2020 spring catalog. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I want to try to get the work done on those. Interesting civil rights themed comic books or thrillers. You can pick up the Golden Legacy books. I think they're still in print. Those are stories about civil rights icons and civil rights themed comics. Golden Legacy, I think, is still out there. You have to Google it, but I think Golden Legacy is still out there. Excuse me. I'm going to get ready to wrap this stream up. See, we got the 50 likes. Thank you guys for the 50 likes. And I'm going to get ready to wrap this stream up and get ready to go back to work. Really would appreciate it if you guys would go out here and pick up Dark Succubus from Amazon. And I'm going to leave another link to it because that's the new John Haynes book. It just dropped today in paperback. And thank you, Morpheus, for the donation. I really appreciate it. But you guys can pick up Dark Succubus on Amazon.com. I really would appreciate it. And if you could pick up the other books for the John Haynes series, or pick up Isis All That Glitters and Esteem Goddess Of in paperback. I would really appreciate it, because with Milestone Media in limbo, the only way we're going to get balanced images of Black people is from independent publishers like myself, Chris L. Brown, Mike Williams, Raymond Leonard, and many others. And that's the only way we're going to get those great stories out here. So I really would appreciate you guys giving me the support. Thank you, Bill, for the donation. And I hope you guys have a good holiday weekend. And if you really want to really enjoy some reading, you can pick up some of the SJS Direct books. I thank you all for coming to the stream. And I thank you all for taking the time to sit and chat with me as I talk to the stream. I'm hoping to have another stream up next Wednesday, and I hope you'll be there for that stream.